And a warm welcome to you all to our public forum, Why Standing Rock Matters, Can Oil and Water Mix? My name is Neil Foley, and I'm a history professor and the co-director, along with my colleague Andrew Graybill, of the Clements Center for Southwest Studies here at SMU. Why Standing Rock Matters was organized with the aim of offering diverse and frankly divergent perspectives on the controversy surrounding the Dakota Access Pipeline, which most of you have read about over the last half year or more, or longer. The Clements Center has long actually been interested in the rights of Native peoples in relation to energy development on or near Indian lands. Recently, the Clements Center held a public symposium on this topic that resulted in a book titled Indians and Energy, Exploitation and Opportunity in the American Southwest, which you may have seen is for sale out in the lobby for those of you interested. Now, the panelists for this forum on the Dakota Access Pipeline controversy have been asked to address questions about the nation's need for energy, the impact of pipelines on the environment and access to clean water, and respect for the sovereignty and treaty rights of Native peoples. But before we begin, I'd like to thank the McGuire Energy Institute and Director Bruce Bullock for co-sponsoring tonight's event along with the Clements Center for Southwest Studies. We are also grateful for the support we received from the Dedman College of Humanities and Sciences, the Center for Presidential Studies, and the Dedman College Interdisciplinary Institute. I want to offer special thanks to Dr. Farina King, a fellow at the Clements Center and citizen of the Navajo Nation, for her work in proposing, and planning this forum, and also my colleague, Professor Ed Countryman, who offered valuable assistance. And finally, I want to thank Ruth Ann Elmore of the Clements Center, who kept in motion the many parts to make this event possible. She not only makes the trains run on time, she lays the tracks as well. So thank you, Ruth Ann, wherever you are in the back there. Introducing the panel in a few moments is Steve Denson, a professor of management and organizations in the SMU Cox School of Business, who worked hard to help organize and promote this event. As director of SMU's MBA Diversity Initiatives and a member of the Chickasaw Nation, Steve promotes what schools and corporations should do to increase diversity and minority representation. He was named Native American of the Year for 2004 by the American Indian Chamber of Commerce, and as a result of his efforts, the Cox School was named by Hispanic Trends magazine as one of the top 25 schools in the nation for producing Hispanic MBAs. Steve received his master's degree in public administration from the Carnegie Mellon University and has been a longtime member of the Clements Center for Southwest Studies Advisory Board. Let's welcome Steve and our panelists.
We're glad that you're all here tonight. And again, my thanks to Ruth Ann as well for keeping all the parts in motion. Now let's get to it. Our panel, I'd like to introduce. First, we have Michael Lawson, who is the president of MLL Consulting, which provides historical research and analysis for government agencies, Native American tribes, law firms, and other private clients. Additionally, he is special counsel to Morgan Angel and Associates, LLC in Washington, D.C. Lawson is the author of Damned Indians Revisited, The Continuing History of the Pick-Sloan Plan and the Missouri River Sioux, a wonderful book that you might want to take a look at along with our Indians and Energy book that we have available. We have Dr. Ty Benchida, who is a managing partner of B&G Products and Services, a consulting company in Houston that specializes in products quality control and assurance, products manufacturing and operation for the oil, fuels, petrochemical, oil refining, lubricants, re-refining, and environmental industries. We're very glad that you're here. We have Eric Reed of the Choctaw Nation, who is a Dallas attorney who specializes in American Indian law and international indigenous rights. For tribal history, we have Cody Two Bears of the Standing Rock Sioux Tribal Council. He is a tribal member who represents the Cannonball District of the Standing Rock Sioux in North Dakota. For energy, we have Craig Stevens, who is a spokesman for the Midwest Alliance for Infrastructure Now, a partnership aimed at supporting the economic development and energy security benefits in the Midwest, with members in Iowa, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Illinois, the states crossed by the Dakota Access Pipeline. Previously, Stevens served as a spokesman for 2 cabinet secretaries and a member of Congress. And finally, we have Dr. Kelly Morgan, who is president of Dakota Consulting and provides professional, cultural, and tribal liaison services in field archaeology. Currently, she is the tribal archaeologist for Standing Rock Sioux. Morgan received her PhD in American Indian Studies at the University of Oklahoma. So it's an interesting panel. It's a very relevant discussion. And again, we're very glad that you're here tonight. With that, I'll hand it to Dr. Ben Voth, who is the Associate Professor of Corporate Communications and Public Affairs with the SMU Meadows School of the Arts. Dr. Voth.
Good evening, everyone. Again, thank you, Steve, and thank you, my colleagues. I am your moderator this evening, and I am tasked with maybe being a little bit of the bad guy. I'm going to try to enforce some time limits. And please understand, in terms of my personal life and teaching mission, I'm here to equip individuals to have their voice. That's what I do at SMU as director of debate. I just got done with 4 debate watch parties on this campus, if you can imagine. So I think I'm ready for the task. But what we want to maximize, what I'm trying to do tonight, is make sure every individual has an equal opportunity to express themselves. And so initially, in the first half of our presentation tonight, we're going to have our panelists presenting for 6 to 7 minutes. And then we're going to have a period of time where the audience is going to have an opportunity to ask questions. And so we want to enable that process as much as possible. And if you hear interferences from me, please understand that it's only so that we can maximize the greatest number of voices. And I just want to applaud everyone involved in this event. I really believe that our society depends upon these kind of First Amendment events where people can express, even passionately, the differences they have about important questions in our society. And certainly this event embodies that. And so I don't want to make this about me. I want to make this about the controversy that we have here tonight. I just want our panelists to know I will let you know when you have 1 minute left. And what I'd like you to do is to present for 6 to 7 minutes, understanding that there'll be audience members who ask questions. You'll have more opportunity to talk later. And so that'll be my goal as serving as moderator tonight. I hope you'll abide with me on that. So that the audience will understand and kind of improve clarity, I think what we'll do is go in the order of the program that you picked up on the way in. And so we don't want to do that. All right. Who wants to, you have an idea? All right. Well, I will let you know, and you guys can let me know as you go along, like who's going next. But what I will try to do is monitor a clock up here and let you know when you're approaching the 7-minute mark. And so with that said, I will turn the floor over to you.
Good evening. The tribal water and land protectors who are opposed to construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline near the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation in North Dakota. I'm sorry. I'm Michael Lawson. I'm a historian who's worked on the impact of the Corps of Engineers dam projects on the Missouri River Sioux tribes. This whole issue needs to be understood within the historical context of the long-standing negative relationship between the tribes along the Missouri River and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. This relationship is in turn set within the context of a longer continuum of interactions that go back to the 19th century. The developments etched in the collective tribal memories from this era include the U.S. Army's military defeat of the Indigenous Sioux nations and the federal government's drastic reduction of their ancestral lands and resources, including the loss of their sacred Black Hills. In fact, one of the most dramatic events in this saga of negative relationships took place on the Standing Rock Reservation, just about 30 miles south of the present Sacred Stone and other encampments, and that was the tragic, fatal shooting of Sitting Bull, the most famous and dynamic spiritual leader of the Hunkpapa Lakota, at Fort Yates in 1890. This unarmed and cooperative holy man was gunned down by a government police officer. In regard specifically to the Standing Rock Sioux's hostile relationship with the Corps of Engineers, it began in the 1950s with the construction of the Oahe Dam on the Missouri River. This project had a devastating impact on the lands, resources, and communities within the Standing Rock Reservation. Congress authorized this multi-purpose dam and 5 others on the Missouri River, which impacted 7 other Indian reservations on the river, as part of the Pick-Sloan Plan authorized by the Flood Control Act of 1944. Yet there was no consultation with the tribes prior to the enactment of this legislation, and in most cases there were no formal discussions with tribal representatives until long after the Corps had begun construction of the projects. The Army simply moved ahead with its operations, unobstructed by any requirements for environmental impact statements or cultural resource assessments. In common with the planners of the Dakota Access Pipeline, the Army chose its construction sites to avoid impacting urban areas, including Bismarck, North Dakota, Pierre and Yankton, South Dakota, and Sioux City, Iowa. This meant that the brunt of the damages from the projects fell heaviest on the Sioux reservations, as well as on the non-Indian farms and ranches adjacent to the Missouri River shoreline. The Oahe Dam, completed in 1962, caused more damage to Native American lands and resources than any other single public works project in the United States. It inundated 160,000 acres of reservation lands, including 56,000 acres on the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation. The tribe's best land and resources were in the timbered bottomlands along the river. The flooding of this land forced tribal members to take up inferior lands on the prairie, since there was no lands of similar quality left on the reservation after inundation. The Standing Rock Sioux tribe had to relocate 190 families, representing about 1/3 of its population. These people lost their best home sites, their most valuable range and ranch lands, most of their gardens and farm tracts, and nearly all of their timber, wild fruit, and wildlife resources. They also were required to remove some cemeteries and private burial sites. But the federal government failed to identify many of the tribe's cultural, sacred, and burial sites prior to inundation. The Corps proceeded to condemn the Standing Rock lands it needed through the right of eminent domain, and refused to budge from its appraised values in negotiating compensation with tribal representatives. The Corps had the authority to condemn individually held allotments, but it was not authorized by Congress to condemn tribal lands or those lands owned in common by tribal members. The Standing Rock Sioux tribe was successful in challenging the Corps on this issue in the U.S. District Court in 1958, but the Corps refused to halt construction of the Oahe Dam. When it decided it was time for the affected tribal members to relocate, the Corps arbitrarily issued an immediate eviction order during the middle of a fierce winter of 1960, with temperatures hovering around 30 degrees below. Tribal members endured this hardship only to discover that the Army could have easily waited until the next summer to relocate them. In the years following completion of the Oahe Dam, the Standing Rock Sioux have found it difficult to negotiate with the Corps to obtain access to Lake Oahe shoreline for hunting,
Mr. Lawson, you have
grazing,
one
and
more
other
minute.
purposes, and to identify and protect cultural, sacred, and burial sites within the Corps' taking area. The Corps has failed. The two tribes also have long complained that the Corps has failed to address their reserved water rights on Missouri under the U.S. Supreme Court's 1908 Winners Doctrine decision, which gave tribes priority rights to water resources within their reservations. In closing, I hope that this brief historical backdrop helps us better understand some of the reasons why the Dakota Access protest has evolved near Standing Rock, and why the issues of water and land protection have resonated so strongly with other Indigenous peoples throughout 2 continents who are now supporting the protest encampments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. All right, if you'll just introduce yourself, then we'll start with you as our second speaker then.
Sure. I'm Craig Stevens, and I represent the Maine Coalition. The Maine Coalition is actually a coalition that's based in the Midwest and supports energy infrastructure development, including the Dakota Access Pipeline. So I'm going to fast forward, several decades from where we just left off and actually talk about the issue at hand here, and that's the Dakota Access Pipeline. So this isn't a new endeavor. The Dakota Access Pipeline has been in discussions in some form for over 800 days. There has been, according to the Army Corps of Engineers, 389 consultations with 55 different Native American tribes, including the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. A lot of these facts and the fact pattern are actually in Judge Boasberg's decision, and I would refer you to him. It was September 9th, his decision in the district court in Washington, D.C. In addition to the 389 meetings with Native American tribes, there are also hundreds of other meetings with policymakers, landowners, and other concerned citizens throughout the nearly 1,200-mile route. It also, the line co-locates, especially in this area that we're talking about, with two pre-existing energy infrastructure projects. One was a electrical wire line, and then also a natural gas pipeline. Surveys have been done by archaeologists throughout this entire North Dakota and South Dakota line to ensure that culturally sensitive areas are being avoided. And even the discussion between the tribes and the Army Corps of Engineers and the Dakota Access Pipeline construction folks have resulted in the pipeline being rerouted 140 times in North Dakota alone. There's been considerable discussion about what's been proper and what's not proper, but at the end of the day, I think most folks agree that the Army Corps, and certainly Judge Boasberg would argue, that the Army Corps of Engineers did everything within their power to ensure that they were crossing their T's and dotting their I's. To date, the project's about 70% complete. There's about 8,000 people working on different parts of the line. When it's complete, it will be, as I said, about 1,200 miles, and will bring about 470,000 barrels of crude from the Bakken Formation to Illinois. And I think, I do want to, in my minute left, talk about the fact that, the question is, can oil and water mix? I think that's, it was a poetic license, but I almost want to talk about this literally in the fact that, of course it can't, right? So we want to make sure that whenever we're transporting petroleum, it's in the safest, most efficient means possible. Right now, there is a rail line that goes within about 1.5 to 2 miles of the Standing Rock Sioux water intake. If that's correct, about 300,000 barrels a day get transported there. This point actually has a greater risk of a contamination of the water intake than the pipeline would have, which would be about 70 miles north of the water intake. So with that, I'm happy to take your questions later.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Stevens. All right, I guess we will return to the order of the program, if that's okay, unless somebody wants to volunteer to go third, or you'd like to go third? Yeah. All right, just introduce yourself and go ahead. Mike?
I'm Ty Benchaida. I would like first to thank the Maguire Institute for inviting me to this panel, as well as the distinguished panelists and the audience for giving us their attention. I have a doctorate degree from MIT in mechanical engineering with emphasis on petroleum engineering. I have been in this industry for over 30 years in various technical, scientific, management, and consulting positions. And I've been consulting for the oil industry on technical matters. What I'm here today is to talk about facts, not fiction, nothing else, but just facts. And so I'm going to go through some of the facts later on with regards to safety of pipelines as compared to rails and trucks and tankers and barges and everything else. But if you scan the environment and if you look at the literature that you have right now, as published by the very well-known organizations, consulting organizations, NGOs, technical consultants, they will all tell you that pipelines are the safest mode of transportation as compared to rails, as compared to trucks, as compared to everything else. Now, if I take you back, we have oil in this country. It's cheap, it's affordable. We cannot continue importing oil from foreign countries. It's not, in my opinion, a matter of energy independence. I see it as a national security, in my opinion, especially in view of what's going on around the world. So later on, if you like, I can dig through the data and share with you some of that information, if you like. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hao madakiapi. Betukile chante washte. Na pe chuzapelo. All my relations. With a good heart, I greet each and every one of you. And thank you all for coming. My name is Cody Two Bears, Mato Nupa, councilman of the Cannonball community, Eyapaha, for the Standing Rock Oyate. I'm a Yanktene from the Cuthead Band. My ancestors come from the east side of the Missouri River and lived there for 125 years before 1862, when the Minnesota Uprising and the Whitestone Hill Massacre moved us to the west side of the Missouri River. I speak to you today with a strong heart. The white man, once again, is threatening us in our way of life. First it was our land in the 1800s. Then it was our buffalo. And now it's our water. I keep hearing we have a 0 to none chance of stopping the Dakota Access Pipeline. That's what they told us at the Battle of Little Bighorn, and we defeated the U.S. government with overwhelming odds against us. And we did it with peace and prayer. And that's how we'll continue this fight to save and preserve our water for our future generations to come. On Standing Rock, we know of the great Chief Sitting Bull, was mentioned here many, many times. And we always use this quote because he thought 7 generations ahead. And he said, let's put our minds together to see what life we can make for our children. And if you look at what's going on today, what kind of life are we making for our children today? I want to go over some history because that's what they wanted me to go over on Standing Rock today. And we also have archaeologists here that's going to go over the legality side. Standing Rock Sioux tribe is a treaty tribe, like many other tribes in this nation of the United States. 1851, 1876, Fort Laramie Treaty, which is a peace treaty with the United States government. In 1877, once again, when I say land, they had the Sell or Starve Act, which took our Black Hills away from us because they found gold on our land. And just to reemphasize what I'm saying, when we talk about consultation, when we talk about nation-to-nation relationships, that's what we are. I'm a dual citizen of this country. I have a social security number and an enrollment number from the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. 1851 and 1876, our great Ochete Shakoe agreed to this treaty with the United States government, which the United States government wrote. Not even a few years later is when they had the Sell or Starve Act, which wasn't agreed to by our great Sioux nation. It was an act of Congress that took our land. 1887. It's called the General Allotment Act, also called as the Dawes Act. And it was to break up the communal native lands into individual family holdings. So once again, they took more land away from us without the approval of our nation. 1889, it was the act which they partitioned the Great Sioux Nation into reservations, is what you see today. Standing Rock. That's how Standing Rock came about, which was still to this day never agreed by the Sioux people. And of course, you heard of gentlemen over here, 1944, Flood Control Act, better known as the Pick-Sloan Act, flooded my people's land and made them take higher ground. And my people had to rebuild. Once again, we talk about consultation. What is consultation? And today, we have the Dakota Access Pipeline, our water. You heard this gentleman to the right of me say, over 300 times we've contacted Native nations. And we have to ask ourselves, what is true consultation? Is it on deaf ears? A lot of these 300 times is phone calls, leaving a voicemail, email. They visited my nation twice.
Cody, Two Bears, you have 1 minute.
Dakota Access Pipeline came once, and we told them we don't want it on our land. We want to protect our water for future generations to come. But consultation today in this world is a checkbox. I'm going to come to your land, tell you this is what we're going to do. You don't like it? Checkbox. Consultation. That's why you see a gathering today, because enough is enough. And I think Native nations, this is something that's unprecedented that's happening today. And we're gathering as one to not only protect ourselves, but protect everyone that's sitting in here today and everyone that's out there. We're protecting them from themselves. That's what we're doing this for. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I'm Eric Reed. I'm an attorney here in Dallas. I actually do a lot of corporate law, business law, as well as criminal law. And I have an expertise in Native American law, as well as international indigenous rights. I worked with the Cheyenne River Sioux Nation at Eagle Butte, which is the reservation that is just south of the Standing Rock Indian Reservation. And it also abuts the Missouri River and the Lake Oahe project. I was involved in the legislative act that involved reclamation for disparity involved in the floodlands because of the way they placed the dam. It flooded more Indian land than it did what they were told it was going to flood. Literally overnight, a lot of people had to uproot, move, try and dig up relatives and bury them on bluffs on the Missouri River. Because if you've ever spent a winter in South Dakota, you don't want to spend it on the highest butte. You want to spend it down in a river valley where the 30-mile-an-hour winds, it's negative 30 degrees, aren't there. The state of the law in terms of these issues, often Indian law is known as the miner's canary of law in the United States, because when miners would go down into their mine to dig out all the gold and stuff on Indian land, they would take a canary, and if the canary died, they knew they needed to high-foot it out of that mine because they were getting ready to die from poisonous gas. Most of the articles written on Indian law discuss what black letter law is, or the norm of law in the state of American jurisprudence. And then there's the exception to the rule. It's called Indian law. Domestic federal Indian law and international rights, because Indian law involves treaties, tribal laws, federal laws, state laws, and administrative laws and regulations. It involves laws of other countries because sometimes tribal nations are located between two countries, in the United States and Canada, in the United States and Mexico. So it creates a complex set of legal analysis that are required that most jurists don't even understand. And the jurists that make decisions on these cases don't even have a clue. But the greater problem is that the law as we have it, as it relates to Native American people and tribes and sovereignty, is based completely on a false precept of racism. When I was on the United Nations draft committee for the Declaration of International Indigenous Rights in Geneva, Switzerland, that was trying to redress a lot of what different nation states' laws had based on those racist precepts. That was enacted in law when President Obama signed it into law after it went through the House and the Senate, and it's part of our statutory law. And that leads to, how does it relate to Standing Rock in the water? There was a decision in the D.C. Circuit Court that denied a motion for preliminary injunction to halt construction. September the 23rd. Immediately, the Department of Justice, the Army Corps of Engineers, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the EPA, and the President's Office issued a administrative order halting any construction near or around federal land. And as a courtesy, there was a buffer set up. And the reason for that is that clearly in that effort to try and do this appropriately, it's amazing to me, even in the city of Dallas, when they want to build a road, a highway inside of flood levees, that the Corps of Engineers hands out these permits to construct and do things inside of flood lanes and in water that people depend on for drinking, like handing out candy to children. They don't do any environmental impact studies. They don't even follow their own regulation. And so that is why they halted the construction. And they issued two issues. One, how federal agencies can better ensure meaningful tribal input to infrastructure-related reviews and decisions to protect tribal lands, resources, and treaty rights within the existing statutory framework. And two, whether federal agencies should propose new legislation to change the statutory framework to promote these goals. Further, it stated that the Interior Department, DOJ, Army, EPA, and Office of the Executive provide a framing paper with additional detail to include description of the statutory framework currently in place prior to the initial meeting of October the 11th. These meetings are supposed to go on through November, and what does it entail? That is, from a legal standpoint, it involves government-to-government consultation and the potential for regulatory and statutory changes as it relates to this pipeline, even going forward. Secondly, when you talk about consultation or anything legal, you want to assume that things are unbiased. And the tribes really want an unbiased forum, an independent forum, to have that consultation take place, not merely a notice and a dictation that this is going to happen.
Mr. Reed, you have one more minute.
Thank you, sir. So in order for free and appropriate legal means to take place, it has to happen on theories of equality. The Army Corps of Engineers is going to review the permits because it appears many of them were issued inappropriately. And it's unclear as to how they got it issued. They want to look at a number of federal laws that involve that. There is also ongoing litigation between the tribe, the Corps, and the Dakota Access corporations. And there may be more litigation involving that. I'm not certain, but I'm not involved in any of that litigation. The potential consequences of what might happen to the water is very important in that. And then, of course, what our esteemed archaeologist is going to talk about in a moment, about public archaeology and tribal and sacred cultural rights. But in terms of how this is evaluated from a legal standpoint, jurists are presenting with very complex questions. And it's impossible to say that politics, money, greed, profit don't play into a lot of that. Unfortunately, I've seen it for 25 years. Two of the cases that I worked on involved eagle pits on the building of a road. And even when we had an order, they bulldozed one of the hilltops that had eagle pits. And an eagle pit is where an eagle comes and they would get the feathers for sacred ceremony and then release the eagle again. Another involved some remains where there had been scaffolds. And
Mr.
then
Reed,
the other
can you wrap
case was
up?
Sioux, which involved the Tyrannosaurus Rex head that was dug up off of our reservation in the middle of the night and secreted into a warehouse in Rapid City, which led to more civil litigation and criminal charges. So the importance is to find how do we get an unbiased forum that this can take place, because we need energy and we also need to protect water and sacred rights. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Reed.
Oh, midaki api chante washte anape chuzapi. I thank you. Thank you very much for inviting us here. There's really, in my mind, nothing more pressing than to deal with the subject matter that brings us here tonight. The history around this is convoluted and complex, and very few people have all of the pieces to the puzzle. None of us as lawyers, archaeologists, or laymen, or public alike have all of the answers. The history of it certainly predates July 2014, when it was announced by Energy Transfer. And then them arriving at Standing Rock to discuss things with the tribal council, at which time the sitting tribal historic preservation officer at the time, Washtenawi Young, the sitting chairman, Chairman Archambault, and Tim Ment Sr. at that time spoke out and said, "This is not tribal consultation. We welcome you when you return to start that full tribal consultation process." And we have September 2015 when the Corps sent out the letter, September 3rd that many of you have seen. We have December 2015 when the EA was released. That EA had to be redone. It was so poorly done by Mergent. Gray and Pape had to come in and redo that survey. Those surveys were not complete. We know that today. And we know that the camp started April 1st, 2016. There's more than one camp. We have what is happening today as we speak on the ground out there with real human beings who are putting their lives on the line to try and stand up for what they feel is right. The regulations that the Corps of Engineers, that Mr. Stevens says that the Corps did their job. No, the Corps did not do their job. The Corps did a very poor job. The Corps' Appendix C that they function under as a legal document is an illegal document. That document is one which the way that they get confused on this is well, they don't have enough resources. And the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. And the right hand is arguing with the left hand. And so we come to today with a very large, convoluted entity that puts forth their final statement. And then we have individuals such as the gentleman sitting next to me claiming that the Corps did their job. We have those regulations under Section 106, Section 101, D6B, which says that tribes have the sole right to identify those properties of religious and cultural significance, yet we have archaeologists that are not from any tribal group identifying them for us. And people wonder why we're upset. We have a very convoluted process, a very convoluted set of circumstances that lead us to where we're at today. The tribal consultation process was never formally initiated on the part of the Corps of Engineers. The process in the timeline, we can argue back and forth all we want, but we know that now a judge, the judge's decision, which was heavily laden with, it was almost as though he didn't read any of the depositions on the tribal side, that he only read the deposition from the Corps of Engineers. And, you know, with that process is backwards. You're supposed to start that tribal consultation at the beginning, not at the end. Not when the EA or the EIS is drafted do you start tribal consultation. Everyone involved knows that this is how it's supposed to work. The government agencies know it's supposed to work this way. The tribal entities know it's supposed to work this way. Yet we have a process that the Indian tribes are, that process of tribal consultation is not initiated until they are done or almost done with the writing of that draft EA or draft EIS. So what triggers the NEPA process? In this instance, with this particular one, we first had the BLM, and we found out later even the BIA was involved, and nobody wants to talk about that. And we have the Corps of Engineers. We have the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that jumped on towards the end. We have the U.S. We have several agencies that have been in this process, and well, who's going to take the lead? Well, there has to be some changes that are made at the congressional level so that tribes have a fair, and if we have to negotiate in a fair and good way, in that fair, good faith effort, so do all other entities. That governance process, the SHPO offices, or the state historic preservation offices and the tribal historic preservation offices, are supposed to be on the same level. Yet, in this instance, we have state laws and the state PSC, Public Service Commission, and the state SHPO signing off on something and giving concurrence to something without having any involvement from the tribe. And you tell me, when the Bismarck City Commission tells you, DAPL, that no, we don't want it above our city because we are concerned about water quality, how is it then that our water quality, for those of us, is less than? This is one of the best instances of institutional racism that you will see currently going on, and we're not getting the attention that we need. And you know, how is it that the state trumps the federal? It's you know, the surveys were incomplete. There's cumulative effect, the impact to indirect and direct to these sacred sites that they have blown through in every state. Every state has had burials blown through. This is a very bad mark on U.S. tribal relations. This is quite historic. What's going on the ground out there is quite different than what's going on legally. That's quite different that's going on within the tribal governments. The fact remains that the reserved water rights of the Oceti-Sakowin are being violated. The water quality is being violated. And we must agree that we should not have gone through this so quickly. Why is it that our peoples are expendable? Why is it that our water quality, that our sacred sites, that our water rights are more expendable than the general population?
Thank you, Dr. Morgan. Now we're going to give the audience an opportunity to speak and ask questions. We have microphones. We really would love for the audience members to use them. They're located in the back of the auditorium. If you're able to access those, we would ask you to do that. Otherwise, of course, speak loudly. And then we're going to let the panelists kind of respond to the questions from the audience. Before we kind of enter into that phase, I just want to remind everybody, I'm here to equip each individual to have their voice. Each one of us might be tempted to go to the microphone and give kind of a long speech about what we think should be done or what opinion should be held. But what we really would like tonight is questions. And so it is possible that I might interrupt you and say, what is your question? I don't mean any rudeness or disrespect. I just want to know what the question is so that our panelists, who are really obviously deeply involved in this controversy, can give you a really good answer on those questions. So with that said, I will moderate an audience question period for the next 45 minutes. We're trying to wrap up by 7:30. We've got about 40 minutes to let you speak. So the floor is now open. If you would raise your hand, and when you speak, if you would introduce yourself and then give your question, that would be the perfect thing for our panelists to respond. Is there somebody who'd like to go first? Yes, right here. And if you don't mind going to this microphone, that would really be fabulous.
My name's Tom.
That sounds good.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yep.
My name's Tom Sullivan. I'm just a concerned citizen. I may be dense, so excuse me on this point. I understand the situation regarding the tribe and the government imposing its will over you. I'm not quite sure what the water issue is. Is it a fear that the pipeline will break and spill oil into the drinking water on the reservation? Where does the water concern come into play?
All right. Let's open that up to our panelists. Who wants to deal with that issue?
There is a huge threat to the water quality, to the people all along where this pipeline, it also crosses at Williston. There's one already in place at Williston, and then this one. And, you have the pipeline in the Northern Border Gas Pipeline right-of-way. The Northern Border Gas Pipeline is a 6-inch natural gas pipeline that, there's supposed to be federal regulations that keep them a specific distance. When we were out on the ground the other day, there was only 23 feet. With the large machinery, the staging of that machinery, the trenching that has to go on, and especially with the HDD, the horizontal directional drilling that will take place. My fear is that the Northern Border Gas Pipeline will break. Not too many people are talking about it. There's a lot of gas lines breaking across this country all of a sudden. That's because they're old. They were made with inferior steel. It's a Trans-Canada pipeline that carries that gas, and it is at high risk of breaking. And so there's, when they do the HDD, it is going to cause a lot of energy to be impacted in the earth, and that's going to also disturb the graves, the burials that are in the area. And so, there is a distinct issue with water quality, and the fact remains that there's no way that you can guarantee, it's not if, but when a pipeline will break. The KXL, not the Keystone XL, but the Keystone pipeline broke. It had only been in functional for a very short time period. So the valves are of a problem, it's because they've built the infrastructure out in the Bakken and along these lines so quickly. Let's rush to put it in. We need to get that there. Another primary concern that I have is when there is full intention. I'm quite certain that there was a conversation prior about when this pipeline would go in. They certainly just didn't think it up in July of 2014. There had to have been at least a couple of years, probably since Keystone XL was stayed, and from that point forward, well, let's go over here. My concern is that tar sands is going to be flowing through this pipeline. If you put tar sands through this pipeline and then you have sweet crude coming through it, you have to flush it with fresh water. You have to flush it because they're too volatile. And so where do you think that fresh water is going to come from? Whose water rights are being violated? What water quality is going to be impacted? And if any of you have been paying attention to this, you have to realize that it was just okayed that fracking water could be put into the Gulf. What do you think? Where do you think that's going to be coming from? It's going to be that fracking water from other areas too, but certainly the potential that fracking water will be coming all the way from North Dakota is probable, because you have to clear it out. You have to hundreds of thousands of gallons of fresh water, drinking water, that's coming from the aquifer, from the river. Because they can't just put any, they can't use fracking water. They have to flush it. When they turn one valve on, send the tar sands through. When they turn that valve off and want to put the sweet crude through, they're going to have to flush it. And they're going to have to flush it with fresh water. And so we need to think about this. And yes, the whole argument about rail versus pipelines, it's all dangerous. Are pipelines safer? I will venture to say that there's a good argument that they are. However, we have a right as a nation to stand up and say, not on our northern border. If you look to the oil and gas map that's out there, there's a number of them. Where are there no oil and gas pipelines? On the Oceti-Shakopee lands, because we have fought against this. Standing Rock stood up against Keystone XL, and if we're going to stand up against that, we certainly better stand up against this.
If I may.
Yes, please.
So,
Mr. Stevens.
Dr. Benchaitik actually talked about the engineering behind the pipeline and some of the techniques to be used. But, with regards to the pipeline itself, it would be between 90 and 115 feet below the riverbed. It's actually double walled there. There are valves on either side that are monitored 24 hours a day, can be shut off within 3 minutes. With regards to, the claim, and I, with all due respect, and I don't mean to sound trite, but with all due respect, that it's not a matter of if, but when. I mean, pipelines are by far the safest mode of transportation when it comes to petroleum. There are already 8 pipelines that cross the Missouri River. And with regards to what we're finding in the statistics, when you look at the safety effects of a pipeline, a typical 1 mile stretch will leak once every 474 years. So literally 5 centuries. That's how durable these pipelines are. Thank you.
All right, do other panelists want to speak to the water issue? Yes, please.
Yeah, just a couple comments real quick. There's you said water is the main concern for the tribe, of course, by far the most concern. But there's also other concerns, like I said, is the state would bring in their archaeologists, because we're mainly concerned too of our sacred burial grounds, our sacred sites, and that's why they put Section 106 in place, is because Dakota Access Pipeline and the state would always say, well, we hired the best archaeologists to do this job, and we didn't find anything along the corridor. But, they don't know what to look for when it comes to our ancestral stone features, our sacred sites. They don't know what to look for because they haven't grown up in our history and our culture. That's why Section 106 was put in place. And when we talk about, water, that's the most important thing that, we need as individuals, everything. It nurtures this land, the animals, the people. And, and I could agree with these guys and say pipelines probably is the safest way. But the way it is now, there is no safe way. When we say safe, I mean, every day I hear pipelines and gas lines breaking all over this country. Every day. Every day I turn on the news, somebody's being affected. It may be the safest, but it certainly isn't the best option in my eyes. And I just wanted to make those comments that, when we grow up on a reservation, we're close to the Creator with our ceremonies and our culture. And we're living in a prophecy. And I want you guys to understand that. Today is that day where it's going to shift. Time is going to change. The people are starting to stand up. The people are starting to come together. And our teachings would tell us, and our ceremonies would tell us, no pipeline is safe. I don't care if you have the best scientists in the world. When you're guided by the Creator with culture and ceremony, they'll tell you that's the most dangerous thing to ever come across your land. So you can have the best scientists in the world, but I can guarantee you, with our culture and our ceremonies, we have that direct connection with the Creator, and He's the one that guides us and tells us these things. It's not no scientist. It's not no best technology. Technology gets outdated nowadays. Man-made things break. I don't care how long you build them, they break. Thank you.
All right, did anybody else want to speak to that? Yes, please, go ahead.
I'd like to say something about safe pipelines. Yeah, sorry. Sorry. We currently have 208,000 miles of pipeline in the United States. 208,000 miles. You know how much that is? That's going around the globe 10 times. 10 times going around the globe. And you know how many fatalities we have every year by pipelines? We have exactly 20. Do you know how many people get killed by lightning a year? 35. Twice as many people are killed by lightning than by pipeline. So the issue is not, the way I look at it is safe, safer, and safest. Everything has a little price to be paid. Every morning we get up and get in the car, right? How many people get killed by cars in this country? 36,000 people get killed by cars every year. That doesn't preclude us from getting in the car every morning. There's a little price that has to be paid for our way of life. Getting hot water, getting gasoline for our cars, getting air conditioning, getting energy for power plants, and so on and so forth. So let's not kid ourselves. There is no ideal thing. Everything has a little price. So I just like to give you that, keep that in mind. 20 people get killed by pipelines a year for 10 times going around the globe versus 35 getting killed by lightning. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go to a question right over there. Yes.
I have two parts here. One of my questions is you say that, we make a decision. In this case, the Standing Rock Sioux tribe hasn't been given the opportunity to say, to even be heard, we don't want this here. They have not been given the full opportunity to make a decision. So I don't understand where what you just said comes into play in this. If it is their thought, you have a group of people here, if they think that this pipeline is going to, it will break. I mean, this whole issue has raised up so many issues of all the pipelines that have broke across the United States that we don't hear about. But if they don't want it there, if you have a group of people that do not want it there, I don't understand why that is just not taken into consideration. This is their water source. And you, sir, you were saying that this pipeline was rerouted, the plan of it, I forget how many times you said, but, one of the things I've read is it was supposed to go near Bismarck, but it was rerouted away from there. What was the final decision, for them to put it where they're putting it at today? Why wasn't it put through Bismarck? Why wasn't it put in the other areas? Why was it chosen to be put right there? And then you have a group of people, a group of ethnic people, diverse people that don't want it there.
All right, let's have the panelists answer that question. I think you've got three questions there. Let's go ahead. What panelist would like to answer that?
Sure. So I'll take you back to Judge Boasberg's decision. I know Dr. Morgan doesn't necessarily agree with what the judge said, but I'll take you back to there because that is where the clearest fact pattern is. And according to Judge Boasberg, the tribe actually either denied or canceled appointments with the Army Corps and with the Dakota Access Pipeline. There were, as I read, at least a dozen opportunities for the two to meet prior to the early on in the consultation of this, and the tribe decided not to. And that is perfectly well within the tribe's right if they want to do that. Secondly, you asked a question about the Bismarck route, the alternate route. So that route is longer. It's about 11 miles longer. It also does impact more people. There are more water crossings throughout there are more water crossings, and it is topographically more treacherous to actually put the pipe. So that's why the Army Corps of Engineers, I think, went with this preferred route.
Do other panelists want to speak to her questions? There were several. I think you did. Yes.
From a legal standpoint, generally you want to locate a pipeline that runs toxic stuff through it away from the water, not next to the water. But there's a reason. There is a legal decision called Dollar General where United Railroad Commission Association filed an amicus brief in that case in which the tribe had jurisdiction over a company that an employee sexually assaulted a child on the reservation, and they fought the jurisdiction. The reason the Railroad Commission wanted that is the next Indian wars in this country is going to be easements, plain and simple. And why is that? Because people don't want that nasty pipeline going on their property. That's why the Bismarck people didn't want the pipeline going on their property. From a liability standpoint, if the thing explodes, breaks, spills oil everywhere, do they want it going into the drinking supply or in soil where they can potentially clean it up and haul it away to a toxic dump? That's reason and common sense. But the reason that they're putting it near the river and down that easement is because it's core land and they don't have to buy private property rights.
Well, actually, 97% of...
May I finish? Thank you. And then the other reason is that when you have to deal with a tribe, and the case that they were trying to make in Dollar General is so that they have no liability if it spills and goes onto an Indian reservation. And that's what I wanted to say.
My apologies, Mr. Reed. So 97% of the entire pipeline is actually on private properties. Only 3% is on federal lands. So that's the only place where the Army Corps actually has any jurisdiction here. We're also talking about 1,000 feet, which is the distance under Lake Oahe. The rest of the pipeline has been fully permitted by the 4 states and the federal government. Even the Army Corps Engineers has approved for the writing of the easement under Lake Oahe, and that's actually what's being halted right now, not anything else. So we are talking about 1,000 feet using some of the best technology readily available to implant what would be the most technologically advanced pipeline in the world to offline tankers, offline trucks that are ultimately transporting this otherwise. This isn't about adding capacity to the Bakken. This is about taking other methods of transportation offline. As I mentioned, there's a train that goes across the Missouri River, carries 300,000 barrels of oil every day. There's also trucks that carry tens of thousands of barrels of oil every day, and those are much more dangerous than the pipeline. It's actually more expensive too. And then real quick, the other thing that we'll see as we offload the rail cars is they'll be able to be used for agricultural purposes. So in the past, we've actually seen a backlog of agriculture being able to disperse to other parts of the country. Now we'll be able to use those rail cars for those purposes.
I'd like to follow up on that
Go ahead.
also. I'd like to first address the 12 times that the court ruling says that they had contacted the tribe. What about the dozen times or more that we wrote letters to the Corps that the Corps never responded to? In fact, they never responded once. We've gotten one response from the Corps, and that was way after the fact, already into 2016. What about that? The court did not focus in on that. So I take issue with that. I take issue with the water crossings. There's two crossings. The Williston crossing, the state engineer, who we haven't heard from, said he's very concerned about the Williston crossing because of the shallow depth to which it's been placed. And when the Missouri River floods again, which it will, we know that will occur, won't we? Don't we? We know that for sure. When that occurs, it's going to scour because that's what rivers do, and especially the Missouri River, because of the sandiness to the bottom of it. And when it scours, it's going to bust that pipeline on that end. This, the 90 feet down, well, let's address that. Let's address the direction that it took from Tioga all the way down and around and then down and then over. Well, why did they do that? Because they wanted to go through the northern border gas pipeline, ROW. But addressing this 97% entirely private, if you look to the PSC, you look to the documents there are a lot of those private landowners that did not want this pipeline coming through their land. Why did they have to allow it? Because of eminent domain, because they were threatened with eminent domain. So, the 3% that belongs to the Corps and the 1,000 feet that's under Lake Oahe, newsflash, everyone, the subsurface belongs to the members of the Oceti-Sakowin. It was never litigated. That subsurface belongs to the Standing Rock Sioux Nation and all other members of the Oceti-Sakowin. This was never considered. And so when we think about the legalities of the things that are being violated in the national interest for energy security, the United States government should be ashamed of itself. And I have a lot of friends in the Corps and at the Forest Service and the Fish and Wildlife Service. I have tried hard to build relationships with them, but I am not ashamed and I am not afraid to say that the United States government should be ashamed of itself for what it has allowed to occur here, because it ultimately rests on the shoulders of those individuals who are higher ups that have kept silent and have allowed for this to get as bad as it has. When we talk about the 208,000 miles of pipeline that are underneath the ground, we should be afraid. Look at what's occurring. How old are they? Give me some more stats. How old are those pipelines? What kind of pipelines are they? How fast were those pipelines put in? What laws were violated? Which corners were cut so that an oil and gas company conglomerate could make an extra buck at the expense of you as the American people, who will have to suffer the consequences of what will occur, is occurring. And it's like, because of what's going on with the national media, it doesn't get the proper coverage that it needs. When will this is environmental racism. This is egregious. And the Native nations of this country are standing up to this abuse. And it's occurred over and over and over again. And we have taken the stance that we're taking, and we're not backing down. And we now have the result of what we now have to deal with, what's happening out on the ground out there. And I will remind you, it's happening as we speak here today. There are people, human beings, that have traveled a long distance to stand with the Standing Rock Sioux Nation. And we thank them for coming to do that. And we have a lot of stress and a lot of pressure that are on those who are representatives of this nation and other nations of the Oceti Shakui and all of those tribes that have come together to try and support us, and those who are non-natives. And we're told that we're now homeland security risks. Well, the homeland security risk is the lack of consultation, the lack of communication, and the lack of understanding of trying to come to the table and meet us halfway, and that never occurred. I'm telling you, it never occurred. And now we have this end result.
All right, we have about 15 minutes left, and I'd love to get at least a couple more questions if I could. I'm going to go.
I have a comment here on what the gentleman just said. The number of fatalities I used previously of 20, that's a number that is valid for the last 10 years. It's not for this year only or last 2-3 years, it's for last 10 years. Okay? Just want to make that clear.
Okay, let me go to at least one more question here, right here in the front.
Follow up on that statistic, because what their concern is, doesn't sound like it's people being killed, it's petro products being released into the environment. What statistics do we have about the number and amount of pipeline failures over the course of the year, and how does that correlate to whatever the technology is that they're planning to use in this particular pipeline?
Ramifications on human
Okay.
life.
Just to respond to this gentleman. 2014, 1 billion barrels of oil transported. The release was 5,000 barrels. That's minute in my number crunching. Very, very minute.
In a case that I was involved in, there's over 300 instances of pipeline failures in the United States
I think what's
per year.
PHMSA has those statistics, so it's not a secret. I think one of the things that we should think about also is the fact that the reporting requirement has gone down precipitously recently. It's now, I believe it's 5 gallons is what you have to report. It used to be, dozens of barrels. But so the actual reporting instances have increased simply because of the threshold for reporting.
I find it horrendous that you're using statistics. Where's the human component in this?
Okay, I just think that we need to pay more attention to the value, to the human value, and the treaties that have been broken, and what we as American citizens and our government owe to tribal members, to Native, Indigenous citizens of our country, citizens of the world, I should say, because they are sovereign nations. And we need to honor the best we can any treaty that we have left that has not been broken.
Okay. Thank you. Let's have a reaction. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
Cody,
thank you for those comments. And I totally agree with what you're stating. I just want to, since we're talking about statistics, I kind of want to let you know on a few, just from Standing Rock, because the title of this whole thing is Why Standing Rock Matters. And just to give you some statistics, when they took the Black Hills away from us, all that land, they pulled out of there over $3 trillion. So when we talk about Native Americans and putting stuff on our backs for this national interest, it's true. And, as a nation, as a tribe, I think the Native peoples and Indigenous peoples of this country have put a lot into this national interest of this country to make it to where it is today. And, just to give you an example, like I said, we put a lot to this country when we gave up the Black Hills. And it ain't about money for our people. They offered us pennies for the Black Hills in a settlement in 1980. You look that up. And that money is still sitting there today. Over $1 billion is sitting in there that our Sioux people will never claim, because money is not an issue to us. The environment, the water, the land, the animals, that's important. Another national interest for you that our tribe, specifically of Standing Rock and the Great Sioux Nation, has given to this great country was, of course, the Flood Control Act, which this gentleman knows all about. He wrote a book about it. They generate hydropower off of the water that desecrated our lands. WAPA, Western Area Power Association, that powers the whole region in our area. Our people lost land and homes for that, so this country can benefit from it. And what little we have left, that's why I'm telling you, is that we have not much more to give. And what little we have left, we have to preserve that for everyone, because there's going to be a time. I understand what this gentleman here says about death. It's not about death. It's about not having to pay $10, $15 for a bottle of water 20 years from now. That's what it's about. And I understand their argument. I understand what they're saying, that, you know, pipelines are going to increase this national interest of this country. And I'll quote my chairman, Orchambo. What he says is that if you want to put more interest in this country, just don't do it on our backs anymore. Do it somewhere else. That's all we're saying. Don't do it. Don't put it on the indigenous peoples of this land anymore. Because its history would tell us this has happened to us many times. And we may talk about consultation. We may talk about he said, she said. And I can honestly tell you that Judge Borsberg has only read one side of the story. I've seen our side of the story. I've read it. 100 pages. Two totally different stories we're talking about here now. I understand the judge took this side, which is fine. But you also have to know our side and what we did on our side to try to talk about consultation to our tribe. But those are the comments I have. Thank you. Thank you for the question.
All right, let's go with one more question here. I'm going to go to this gentleman in the middle. We'll wait for the microphone if you don't mind. We're going to have one more question.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Harold Pruner with the Delaware Indian Tribe. I've served on our tribal council and done a lot of work on some of these problems. I would first like to congratulate Clements Center and all for putting this together. I think it's been extremely informative. And if this was the panel solving the problem, it'd take a little more time, I'm sure. But I think we've had a good exchange of ideas. I would suggest a couple of things that we've done within our tribe. One is I'm chairman of the Native American Broadband Association, and my son Mark, who's an attorney that graduated from SMU, in fact, here. We had a similar situation where the tribal interests were being ignored with the passage of the act of Congress, the stimulus bill, in which $7.2 billion was set out to increase the infrastructure, similar to increasing the infrastructure of pipelines, but in this instance, the infrastructure of fiber optics, so that you could tie in and tie Native Americans to the internet. The interesting part is Congress ignored the tribes, didn't say anything about it, even though they defined what was called the last mile group, which was generally farmers. But we were able to call for, and it's been brought up here, and I think it's a solution, and I pray that we end up with a solution in which the Standing Rock Sioux, all of their interests with regard to funerary objects and sacred objects, and as is also included in the NAGPRA Act, as you know, the other artifacts and things that are sacred to the tribe, that they would come up with that solution. I think the pipeline will be built. I would hope that the pipeline companies see a way to divert it around this problem. But I believe you've been deceived or misled or improper, underserved is a better term, by the federal agencies that should have been involved in this from the beginning. When we had the situation, we went to the Commerce Department and to the Agriculture Department and asked for and got the consultation meetings that you mentioned any number of times. Executive Order 13175, and put in place by President Clinton, reinforced by President Obama. And so I hope and pray that you all will exercise that right, and that the government will see it, and that they will bring the proper people together, and you will, through the process then, work out a diversion of the pipeline. Yes, we still need it, the oil and gas flowing from the places where it is to the refinery where you got to refine it for the public to use it. But I pray that this will go well for you. We thank you and all for devoting your time, and I certainly have a lot of sympathy with Standing Rock Sue's position, but having worked for Shell Oil Company and been in the oil and gas business, and with her time with the pipeline company, I have some sympathy for the other side as well. So best of luck to all of you, and thanks again for a great conference.
Very much. Any reaction from the panelists? Anybody want to react to that, or you want to take one more question or comment?
The only thing I can say is at Fort Berthold, they have a refinery. Why do they need to pipe it all the way to the Gulf of Mexico when they can refine it right there? And then the other question is, as long as we import oil into our own country and pay foreign governments for our oil, why are we exporting oil to foreign countries if it's such a national security issue? There shouldn't be a drop of that oil going to a foreign country. That oil needs to be used in our own economy, and we need to put funds to create an infrastructure that is safe for certain things and piped into areas where it's not going to destroy 18 million people's water supply.
Would you like to say it again?
How sound are pipelines given earthquakes due to fracking?
Okay. Sorry about that. So are pipelines still safe with earthquakes?
Good luck.
Thank you for the question. I have seen all kinds of reviews, and I have studied all of them, but the jury is still out there. There is a lot of data that says it is, and there is equally and overwhelming data that says it's not. So the jury is out there as of now.
Is there any pipeline?
I'm giving her the answer I can give her. I'm giving her the answer I can give her.
And
I'm not gonna tell her what she likes to hear. I'm gonna tell her the facts. Okay?
The question was, how are the earthquakes going to affect the line? If you don't know the answer, just say so, but don't start telling us that it's not proved yet that fracking doesn't make the earthquake.
Right. Let's let them answer. Is it other?
Well, one of the questions that I would shoot back at everyone to think about is there any single pipeline in this country that it was built to earthquake specs with the design in them to withstand an earthquake? Is there an answer to that? I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm going to venture to say that those that are over 30 years old, probably not. Were there any individuals from Japan that were involved in the engineering that said, hey, maybe we might want to make them earthquake safe? It's a very good question.
Is there a further comment from the panelist? Or?
I mean, there are certainly valves throughout the line of a pipeline where they can shut off oil whenever there's a disruption, and the monitors along the pipeline actually can tell, and I'll speak to DAPL specifically, if there's a flow rate of less than 1% between the two monitors, and they can actually tell, and there'd be somebody who could shut it off within 3 minutes. So whether that's an earthquake or other event, it can be stopped.
Okay, you want to speak to that? Go ahead.
Got the guy in the red shirt's been raising his hand all day.
All right, let's hear a question from the red shirt.
Yeah, he's been raising his hand the whole time.
Okay. This is going to be the last question because we're almost out of time here.
Are we going to get a time to be able to say one last thing, or no?
Name's Albert Old Crow, Cheyenne Nation.
I think it'll be after time, but it's okay, yeah.
Got a question for these two guys right here. Pretty smug. When disaster strikes on these pipelines, has no effect on you personally, are you willing to take one of your kids or your grandkids and put them in that jeopardy?
Is that the question?
That's the question.
All right. Do panelists want to address that?
Well, I hope I'm not smug, so I guess I'll start with that. So apologies if I came off as smug. I mean, I do have a couple of kids, and recognizing the importance of energy infrastructure and safe energy infrastructure, I think, is something that's important, not only to me, but to future generations. I also think the jobs that come along with energy infrastructure is important. I believe that pipelines are the safest way to transport petroleum. We talked about the 208,000 miles and the literally millions of barrels of energy product that is shipped every day across this country safely. Dakota Access Pipeline itself would be the safest, most technologically advanced pipeline ever constructed. There are pipelines that we don't even know where they are. So at the end of the day, it's a course of life.
You said you can shut them off in 3 minutes. Are you willing to take one of your grandchildren there and let them sit for 3 minutes?
I don't even know how to answer that. I mean, I don't know what that means.
I answered it.
All right. Let me interrupt here. I think we're going to have to kind of bring things to a close here. Incredibly, we've been here for 90 minutes having a very energetic and passionate conversation about an important issue. And I really do want to say a special thanks to the Clement Center and also the business school and everyone that kind of helped put this together, because I really do think the best solutions come when people have honest dialogue and conversation. And you've got to be witness to that tonight for 90 minutes. And I know a lot of people would actually like to talk more. There's nothing that's going to prevent that, I don't think. I mean, as much as people want to individually indulge themselves in the after events of tonight. But at this point, I'm going to have to kind of draw things to a close so that people can move on with their schedules for the evening. But let's just give our panelists, especially, one more round of applause and say thanks.